Okay, I'm sorry that you're also going to see my sidebar as well, which is that's not going to do for good viewing. But basically, what I'm just going to speak about very briefly is the training methodologies for the collaborative coach. I decided on training methodologies because it's something that I found that I only discussed or I only thought about a few times, and that's during a coaching course. And then during the coaching courses, you're asked about your club's vision and your philosophy, and then after the course, you realise that it doesn't really matter what my philosophy is, because I have to do whatever my club wants to do. So I thought it was interesting to look at the methodologies, and in terms of what I already thought I understood of how to work with young players. So that was the whole reason behind my looking at the training methodologies. So the club I work at, I am in charge of the youth programs for our players. They are aged 2 to 17, male and female. Our first team play at the highest level in the Faroe Islands, and we are the oldest club. So a lot of this is based on my current work, and obviously some is also heavily influenced by some of the stuff that I've come across. I haven't been coaching for that long, like for my age, I guess. I've been coaching for 11 years, and I played for a short while. Well, I played for quite a while, but I was sometimes really great and sometimes terrible. So I've got a real mixture of playing background as well. And what I thought was one of the most captivating things about football or soccer is the discussion of ideas and representing those ideas. And Scott Parker recently said that one of the things that he found the most challenging about coaching now that he's in charge of Fulham, but he made the comment when Fulham were performing really badly. So obviously right now they're doing a lot better. But he said the most challenging thing for him, despite having 500 plus games in the top flight, is conveying his ideas to players, and that's working at the performance level. So I don't work at the performance level. Obviously my job is to support the development of players. So collaborating and working with others, I thought is key to trying to share ideas and get the ideas conveyed on the field. I used this image because this was a few years ago in Connecticut. So what I liked about this is one of the parents who's a tough guy. And I loved the kind of intimate discussion that we had. You know, he just wanted to thank me for working with his child, and also about his expectations, you know. And I think the handshake's always important when you're meeting people, or when you're, you know, bidding farewell. The handshake means a lot, eye contact, and also you need to stand by whatever your vision is and whatever your own specific idea is of the game. So I looked up a definition of collaboration, and it said in the Oxford Dictionary, the act of working with another person or group of people to create or produce something. So I've underlined a few words there because I thought that some people talk a lot, and then some people talk and get on with stuff. So I think working is actually important. So you actually drive your group around you to become active and get things done once you've decided on the how. And I like the aspect of creating. Working with young players, we want them to be creative, but we can't give creative license until they have a sense of structure to work outside of it. So we give the structure first. And obviously with business, you have like the 4 Ps or the 3 Ps, your product, your purpose, your people, and your process. So I underlined something because I thought that the something should represent the people, and the people should be, in this sort of discussion, I thought it should be the coaches, and obviously more importantly, the players. So right now, we've got a team of coaches where I work, and the idea is that I make it clear what I like as a coach, but then what's really good and also a little bit unnerving is I'm being tested about the credibility of my own methodology. So the coaches and the board want to know why they should do certain things the way that I am trying to emphasize that we should do it. So we generally have players in these certain phases. So the phases that you're looking at may not be the phases at your club or the academies or your experience, but right now this is roughly what we have here. And so whenever I'm speaking with coaches or a board member, you kind of need to explain your method and what it's based on and why you think it should be the style in which we operate. So I believe that the 7 to 11-year-olds, we want them to have personalities. We want them to be confident. We want them to believe in being okay to find out who they are. We don't need everyone to be loud. We don't need everyone to be really quiet. It's good to have a mix of your personality. So at that age, at 7 to 11, I always try and encourage players to be a little bit crazy, to talk as well. So here in the Faroe Islands with 2,000 people where I'm living and where I'm working, they're often not used to speaking. And they're only used to who they know, and everyone knows everyone here. So when they see a stranger, they don't necessarily approach you. The young players, they often shy away from you. And I'm from South London, where the last thing we do is shy away. So we run towards people and start a conversation. So trying to get these young players to enjoy having a personality, embracing it with the ball at their feet, hopefully. And then I'm quite firm with players. So in China, we're very, very firm with our players. And obviously it's a communist country. And the expectation is that the coach is like a teacher. So I adopted that as part of my own methodology, that before we have fun and before we have the creative maverick, we have to know that this is the structure and we need you to be confident on the ball. So as happy as you might be, you also need to be able to manage the ball. So part of how I work with young players is when they arrive, the arrival activity is structured, and in between is punctuated with simple things, juggling. So it's quite sort of, it's quite strategic, but we need them to be good on the ball. 11 to 13-year-olds, I put a bit more pressure on those players, and I put pressure on my fellow coaches as well, because everyone is wanting to develop a player, but we need to make sure that the environment allows the player to be developed. So we need to be watching the players, and we want the players to understand that we are watching them, we are observing them, and we are putting a little bit of expectation on them about understanding when you arrive, you get into your pre-activation. If your fellow teammate's not doing it right, the environment expects that you speak to your fellow teammate and get them to do their pre-activations properly. And then the same as the cool down, everyone should know the cool down. 11 to 13-year-olds is no excuse. They should know that, and that's what the environment dictates. And then obviously the technical competency and confidence. And then I'd be looking for players to start questioning what's happening on the ball, around the ball, and away from the ball. So they start to develop a tactical awareness. So FIFA said that really you're never too young to start developing a tactical awareness. And so that's what I try to adopt in my method of working with players. Going up to our 13 to 17-year-olds, they're now starting to look at the professional phase. So as they approach the youth development phase or coming out of the youth development phase, they should understand why they have to be fit. I've got a bias. I do like physically aggressive and fit players. So the benefits of that is that you can last longer if you're conditioned. And the aggression doesn't mean you're constantly getting sent off or yellow carded or having to have a heated discussion with your teammates. It means that you understand the purpose of what we're doing. and expect tactical curiosity. So I saw something from someone at Wimbledon where he shared his 14-year-olds, just a little clip of them talking at half time, and it was just like watching art. They were like little coaches. It was so good. It was so good. I just thought, wow, I would love our players to be able to do that. So they were solving problems. They were speaking about switching play, about the danger men, about how to regain the ball, and about pressing. And these were 14-year-olds. So I think to myself, right, that should form part of our benchmarks, surely. So these players now, 13 to 17, they should be curious about what the other team, what their shape is, what their system appears to be, and what we're trying to achieve. And the last bit was loving the process. Male or female players, they should understand that what we're doing fits into a bigger picture, and they should enjoy it, whether they want to be football players or not. It's about developing people as well. So that's part of our process, and that does form part of how I work. I do put pressure on people around me to make that the norm. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to keep jabbering on if you want to ask something, or if you. So the next bit that you should be looking at, it's the game model. You know, most game models I think are pretty much the same. I'm not smart enough to make it more complex, to be honest with you. So I just look at the 4 moments: the in transition, out of transition, in possession, out of possession, and just about the behaviours within them. And it's pretty standard, I think, because what I've found is that when I try to overthink something, and then I'm trying to work with a different group of players who come from a different educational background, the first thing you've got to do is get buy-in. So when I say collaboration first, I don't want to show up with respect to the club that I'm working at, and then decide that they should understand this, they should understand that. If they don't know the difference between man marking and zonal marking, and if they don't know the attacking and defensive principles, I need to actually get to know who they are first. So I don't usually, as part of my methodology, I don't speak much about something like our game model. We have it, but I think you need to respect the environment first and find out who's within that environment, and then layer the learning as we would do with the phases of players. So I always try to get a little bit of collaboration first. Hopefully you can read this. I can just about read it. It's just something that I thought, well, why do we need collaboration? I'm trying to get better at it as I get a little bit more mature, because sometimes I think that as coaches, or definitely in my case, I didn't really appreciate merging my method of working with players, with working with other people, and working with families, and working with fellow coaches. So it was sometimes more confrontational than it needed to be. So we want our players to be problem solvers. And I've put down that I always tell my players, regardless of their age or their maturation in the game, if you've played for 1 week and you've played for 5 years, you should still make an effort to understand that we need you to solve problems. Because I always say to players that the football field is like a Harry Potter picture. If they've not seen Harry Potter, then obviously I have to try and think of something else. But if they can think of the pictures in Harry Potter, they're constantly waving and they're jumping around, well, that's your football field. You know, you got pro players who speak about pictures in the field and recognizing pictures. Well, that's your problem. So I try to encourage players to be problem solvers, recognizing pictures, reacting to pictures, and the importance of standing still. So sometimes reactions don't mean that you physically have to react. Getting players to solve problems first, get their eyes up. You don't have to look straight at something to see it. Get their vision wider, develop their brain, develop their eyes, and then know when to move and when to stand still. Culture is important. So I like our educational system with football back home in England. I like what the FA do. So I'm always trying to think of different ways to include new information into how I work with players, into my method, because I'm not good enough, I don't think, to not try and do more research. And so when I have to have a difficult conversation with one of our coaches who isn't going to be doing the 6-week syllabus because they decided that they don't like this bit, they're going to do something else, then I need to have, I need to be able to back up and support what I'm saying and the reasons why. So I think education and understanding the culture of education is really important. I liked the attitude in China where the boss that I had, he put a lot of pressure on the coaching staff to develop like a think tank, like a boot room mentality. And it meant that it didn't matter like what your coaching background was. So me sort of swanning around with my A license, it didn't make any difference. Like everyone should have a contribution to the environment, and that means that everybody gets developed. So I like that a lot. And I liked one of our coaches out there, he came up with, he said about having a critical friendship group, which I was like, oh, we used to have all these deep conversations. Usually they went on for ages. And a critical friendship group is not someone who says, what a great session that was. It's someone who has a look and makes you think about how it could have been better. And it can be uncomfortable. My boss would say it would make you itch. And it did make you itch. It was sometimes very uncomfortable, but that's the only way that we will really help each other get better and stay on focus with what the purpose is. A sense of citizenship. So when I worked for Chelsea a few years ago, I was on the foundation side of the business. And so my job was to coordinate a program where we had to go and work with the boys that were getting in trouble and coach them, basically. So one of the things that I started developing in my method of working with players was a sense of citizenship. And citizenship means, for football, in my method of working with players, it means the sense of understanding that you belong to something. And you belong to your club, you belong to your teammates, you belong to the shirt you wear. And so how you walk, how you talk to people, whether you're chewing gum, whether you're making eye contact, it's important. So I've tried to merge the two, my experience from Chelsea with match reviews. I started doing it a lot when I was in California, where the players would do the reviews after games, and they would do the review. They would keep it simple and they would relate it to what we've been doing in a week. So they start to feel a sense of ownership and citizenship to how we work, so they understood our syllabus more and they related it more to the game that they just played, regardless of the result, because we're not at the performance phase. So we don't have to feel that pressure, you know. Then the last bit, supporting longevity. So I said that I found that often players stay and improve and they attract other players if they feel connected and engaged to an open environment. So I think it's just the conversations and trying not to have favorites, but also making sure that everyone understands that they are part of the environment and they stay connected. So that's the stuff before you give them the ball, you know. So I try to work that into my method of how I operate, sort of man management style. And that's before we start the ball rolling and actually seeing how competent they are on the field. So those were the 5 reasons that I thought that collaboration was important. So conversations, I think, is important as well. I like to speak to players a lot. Maybe to my detriment, sometimes I speak to players more than I speak to my fellow coaches. But I still think that it's important for how I operate so that I know whether I should be adjusting my methodology. So my method of operating and my method of delivering sessions and delivering a program. So I always try to have the conversation with players. I think the planning is very important. So what I've found challenging so far is getting everyone to buy in to the plan. So obviously your periodization, it has to relate to the environment. So what your year looks like may not be the same as what your year looked like when you were working somewhere else 2 years ago. You can't just keep using the same periodization. It's got to be specific. And then get the phases right, get your blocks right, and then try to stay true to it. So find a way of not constantly changing your method, and then respecting the importance for players to rest, even though you might want to introduce lots of new programs. Make sure that, like in the individual session plan, you have included something like rest, which I found that some coaches that I'm working with, maybe that's a really important conversation. So they're not resting because I'm moving some equipment, they're resting because they're supposed to be resting. That's part of the loading. So I think the planning for your year, for your month, and relating it to the different phases in your yearly calendar, I think that's very important as well. So if you're lucky enough to be at a club or in a football environment where you can film your games, as often as possible, you should. Later on this week, I'm gonna just get my phone and switch record, put it in my pocket, and just record myself. Just see how I speak to players, just keep myself in check, because I've got quite an aggressive style, and I think sometimes you need to just, you know, it might be okay, like, you know, my own upbringing, where I'm from, but I think sometimes it's good just to, I'm telling the players to be a certain way. I think sometimes it's important just to check myself as well. So I'll be doing that this week. We're going to be introducing more video analysis this week as well for our players, primarily for the players who are 15 to 17, but reviewing how we work. And it's not about we're doing a good job or we've got good players. We have to identify problems before they occur. So the best way to do that is to check yourself, first of all, as a coach. So I do try and do that. I don't do it often enough, but I'm trying to change that. And then we need to put realistic pressure on our players and our coaching staff to understand what we're reviewing and the benefits of reviewing things. Don't talk for too long. If you're doing like the video review, obviously it's important what the players see, but you've got to be careful about showing too many negative things, and you've got to make sure that you don't wow them with too many lines and circles and squares and different colors, but try and keep things simple. So I try and do that with the players' review of games and training sessions. So I think that once you've done your planning and you understand your planning, don't be afraid to tweak it a little bit. And then with reviews, make sure I try and make sure I'm reviewing myself as well. And then with a driver, so it's basically, why do I do something? But most importantly, what is driving the players? So where I am right now, there are a lot of players who really, they're looking at our first team and they're thinking, you know, and their families are looking at the local team and thinking, in a year's time, I expect my boy to be in that first team. So if we understand what drives the player, the coaching team, they're local coaches as well, so they've got a big affinity with the club. So I think that it's important for me to know what drives the environment and the people within the environment. Some of them have already got national team experience, so they'll be in one session, but they haven't all got the same driver. So I think it's important to identify what drives the players and their families, and obviously the fellow coaches. I like the idea. I was looking at some of the stuff that was being done at RB Leipzig and at Hoffenheim, and you're just thinking, these are great ideas. I'm going to steal some of these ideas. And I'm going to try and come up with some of my own ideas, because my method of working is that the players should remember a lot of what I say, but there's different ways of communicating my messages. So if I want the player to do the 6-second press, what should it look like? Where should they do it? How do they lead it? Who initiates it? Then I need to think of different ways to make that a vision that they understand. So that's why I like what's being done at IB Leipzig, because I like how they try to make the ideas a reality for the player. And I know that Ajax have got like a little analysis card. They've got a little video in there, and all the players go over and see the training session. And you just think, right, that's a wonderful idea. I don't have to copy it, but maybe it will help my method of working be communicated clearer to players who might only be used to being told as opposed to being shown. So I try my best to come up with new ideas or steal ideas. And I know that my methodology is always evolving. So it's in line with my own bias as a coach. So that's basically what I see as the training methodologies and how to collaborate with other coaches and players as well.